Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for your host, Jimmy Nguyen.
It's a beautiful day. Sky falls, you feel like it's a beautiful
Hi, welcome back. We are continuing our journey into the future of Bitcoin, and this new beautiful day we hope will come sooner rather than later for Bitcoin to be used globally. We're going to have a panel now, and it is going to continue discussions we had yesterday about the merchant adoption process, which says one thing down there, but I'm not going to repeat it. And so I think you can pretend that BCH says BSV now. And so I am going to bring out a number of panelists who are going to help me discuss some of the issues as well as opportunities they've been seeing from the merchant side. So let's give some warm applause to, you've seen him before, Martin Dempster, VP of Innovation from BrewDog. Samovich, CEO of Coppay. Heidi Patmore is head of marketing for CentBee. And finally, the most beautiful pregnant lady in all of Bitcoin now, Elizabeth White, CEO of The White Company. So I want to focus now on the difficulties, because if this was all so easy to get merchant adoption, we'd already be there, right? So let's start with Martin. As you have been implementing Bitcoin payments into BrewDog, what are the biggest problems you are facing, and what would you like to be done to help you?
So I think for me, the actual process of rolling it out into the site was pretty simple. We had a lot of support in terms of doing the training, but even the training for the staff was pretty straightforward, and I think for me it's just about getting volume of transactions. I think there's also a kind of communication piece and a little bit of a technology piece to think about as well. So really my challenge is I've got this sort of first site over the line with our company, and I really want to be making a strong case for how we add additional sites and start implementing payments there too. And I think I've got a strong idea that the sales that we're seeing through accepting Bitcoin are actually incremental. So I think we're actually bringing new customers into the business. I think that's really, really important. And I think on the technology side, there's just a couple of things around some of the wallets perhaps not being as interoperable as they could be, which maybe just causes that confusion for the customer when they're trying to pay. And we're in a fast service environment, so really transaction speed's super critical. So any barriers to that can really put a blockage in. The last thing I want to see is some of our managers getting a little bit disengaged with the technology, because if they're excited about it, then we can make it happen. So that's my take on it.
Okay, Ina, what about you?
Well, for us, it all starts with going to merchant and explaining what it is, and that it's easy and free for them. And of course, merchants are a little bit afraid. We calculated in the beginning, like last year, that it took for our salesperson maybe 1 hour to talk to each store in order to convince them, and not only convince, but explain that it's not going to be difficult for them to accept the Bitcoins. And I can say that there were funny situations. In order to register in our platform, you need to keep your private key. So there were a couple of situations that merchants lost them, and they were calling us, saying, "Oh, okay, but let's give me my password." And we're like, "No, it's your private key. You have to register again." And but in terms of, I would say also that. Once you have this system implemented in store, it doesn't mean that employees will really use it. We had situations when customers were going to the store in order to buy something because they found the store in our merchants map, but employee themselves, even if the owner said, yes, I want to accept Bitcoins, employee may say, oh no, it doesn't work. Because they are afraid to use it, or they are afraid that something will go wrong, that they don't understand Bitcoin, they better understand how credit card works or regular currency works. So for them, sometimes it's easier to say, no, it doesn't work. So when I was in this situation, I'm like, if it doesn't work, let me help you. And they're like, Oh yeah, really? Well, let me check. Maybe it is working already. So, and you really need to look at it's like in regular business, not only owners. Willingness to accept Bitcoin depends that people will be able to spend Bitcoin in the store, but also lots of things needs to be done with people's psychology, and their acceptance that Bitcoin is nothing bad about it, And other than that, I would say when customers can pay with Bitcoin, they really like it because again, we work with brick and mortar stores, and when they see that transaction is confirmed really fast, they're like, oh, that's it. So they're also amazed, that still technology progresses a lot and they can pay with Bitcoin and go ahead. They don't need to wait for anything and they really like this experience.
Let's skip to Elizabeth for a second. So you have a bit of a different experience because your marketplace started for people who already held a lot of coins, right? So what's been your experience?
So it was great for the consumer.
Right.
The merchant side was very hard for them to actually understand what crypto or Bitcoin is.
Right.
So actually we end and settle in fiat in the currency that they're used to. We immediately understand that merchants have hard costs. They have employees, they have overhead. Whatever you're buying from them has a real cost and it's valued in the fiat currency. So we immediately settle with them in 24 hours, which is actually a lot different than they're used to, especially when we're talking to like auction houses or car dealerships, art galleries that might wait weeks for payments to actually come through. So merchants are very happy with the speed of the cryptocurrency, but they're not happy with the volatility.
I see. Do you have any merchants in your marketplace that actually will settle in Bitcoin?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
When Bitcoin was going up and up, they were very happy to accept that.
Right.
But that isn't a long-term thing for them, especially when a sweater costs $50 or a Lamborghini costs $300,000. They are not risking the volatility of the price.
Exactly. So Heidi, CentBee is beginning its journey into merchant integration, right? What are some of the challenges you're seeing as you begin that journey?
I think depending on the type of speaking to, there's different challenges. So if you're talking to a tier 1 merchant, which would be like a multi-lane retailer, a big grocery store, the challenge...
And when you say tier 1, Angus talked about this yesterday, that's how, for example, like the payment networks will classify merchants.
Correct, yeah. So like a Walmart or an Aldi or, those sorts of stores.
Big, high volume merchants.
High volume, lots of lanes, groceries, all that sort of stuff. Everything is about cost with them.
Yes.
The interesting thing was that, for those large retailers, you have to go right to the top. To get any sort of traction with them.
Yeah, the top level, C-level executives.
C-suite executives, and you've got to, it takes a long time to tell that story and convince them that cryptocurrency is a good idea. The general, like the first answer is always no. like anyone you go to, the first answer is always no ways. And it takes a long time to sort of convince them otherwise. We're very lucky because we've got CEOs who are well regarded in the business industry already with their track record. So, we're not unknown entities. So there's already trust there for
well, you can get a meeting, right?
We can get a meeting because
you have Angus and
we're
Lauren.
credible. Exactly. So that's been an interesting learning. It's that lead time is extremely long. But the big opportunity in those large retailers is that price is everything. And if they can save 0.5% on their banking fees or their transaction fees, that's a massive saving for them. On the other end of the scale, when you talk to like the mom and pop stores, first of all, what's really interesting is everyone has heard of Bitcoin. So everyone has heard of Bitcoin. We did tests to see whether they knew the difference between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash at the time. No one had any clue that there was a different thing called Bitcoin Cash, and now we have that again now with BitcoinSV. So they've heard of it. They're a little bit scared. There's still a perception again that Bitcoin is for drug dealers, and I don't want to touch that, and it's not regulated, and and also I know a friend who had some Bitcoin and now they've lost all their money. That's often the narrative that comes out. So I think with those stores, it's a little bit about developing the trust. that this is a good idea and that there's savings there. And with those retailers, you've got to go in with the killer use case. So, for example, you can't go in with like you're going to save a bit of money on your costs, because they don't really care about that. What they care about is this going to bring me more customers? Is this going to improve my profit margin? Is this going to make my life easier and the merchant's life easier? And I think there's a massive opportunity there, because those smaller retailers kind of get a little bit ignored by the Visa, MasterCard community, in that there's a lot of pain that they have to go through with their whole banking systems. To get a point of sale terminal in a small coffee shop is expensive, it takes long, they don't get priority support, and their settlement can take a long time, their fees are high. So the big opportunity there is to like undercut all of that, take out all that pain, and then you'll get those smaller retailers on board.
So I've heard several of you now comment about the need to address assumptions that Bitcoin is somehow bad or used for bad things or volatile, and that having access to the high-level C-suite executives and appealing to them in a financial as well as business way is important. As you watch the Bitcoin world grow up, and I know we've talked a lot here about the need for us to grow up and professionalize as an industry, how important is that to you? Because you are all on the front lines of dealing with integration of Bitcoin at the merchant level. How important is that for the Bitcoin to start presenting a professional image? Yeah.
So I think the press actually has a lot of negative stories about where Bitcoin is today, or hacking, or people losing money, or there's just a lot of unknown things that are still happening in this world that's where the headlines are. Right. And if you do not follow cryptocurrency and you see a Forbes article that says Bitcoin fell to nothing, right, or it's now not happening, or you hear from other speakers, like example Nouriel Roubini, who says don't do it, it's terrible. Like, so if you're hearing this from one side, how do you actually hear the other side? And the merchant needs to understand that again, it's not about laundering money or drug money, it's a technology that can actually help in the future, and it will be the future. So I think the professionalism just needs to grow up, and we need to kind of get out the bad actors. We need to call them out. We need to say that this is not what really Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is about.
Yeah. Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with all those points. I think the other thing I would say is that I think professionalization is really important, but we need to be careful that we don't lose that kind of really important disruptive message and why this is different and really important to get behind. And I think if you look at the success of our business, it's because we set ourselves really clearly up against the status quo. So I think that's just really important about keeping that message really clear, and I think that'll really help people get on board when they realize how important this technology is.
Yeah. What's been your experience with this since you're talking to a lot of merchants yourself?
Yes. In my opinion, the situation is very different in different countries. When we talk about Western countries and we go to big companies, I think top management really understand that nothing is bad going on with Bitcoin in terms of money laundering. They all understand the system. They all understand how cash works, how banking system works. I think for them it's more reputation risks that they care about. They care about their stakeholders, shareholders, and that's why they don't want necessarily to be in a rush, start accepting Bitcoins in the stores for general public, because they kind of right now waiting what will happen next, who will be the first. Everybody is waiting for the first big company start accepting Bitcoin, and then they will be able, when they see the result of it, they will be able to make this step again. Now, when we talk about other countries where there are problems with access to the banking system, with access to even, point of sale terminals that will accept cards, there you don't need to convince anybody. I think there people are more willing to start accepting Bitcoin as additional payment method because it's really easier for them.
Heidi, thoughts from you?
Well, I'd look at this from a branding perspective, and I think that one of the critical things is that there's so many different messages coming from so many different places. Right. And we have that already within the Bitcoin community with all these different, this is because
it's decentralized.
Proof of social media, the price goes up based on one guy tweeting, And I think that it's really hard for the business community as well as consumers to try and differentiate. I mean, you can do all your own research as much as you like, but you're never going to get distilled to what the truth is. What I think a community like this, like SV, would need to do is we need to start talking consistently in the same way with a specific type of brand in a specific type of tone of voice, consistently over time. So it's been a bit, and we were starting to do that with Bitcoin Cash quite well, and then it all fell apart, and now we kind of have to start again. But it needs to be about the idea, not the personalities.
Correct.
And I think that if we can, as a community, agree on certain principles on how we communicate this and how we take this to market, and leverage the fact that we've got the top professionals, the top scientists, the top everyone, the top code developers, leverage those relationships that we already have to build that credibility over time, and just stick at it. Keep telling the same message over and over and over for 3 years, and eventually it'll sink in. So I think as a community, if we could start talking in the same way, or at least have open source resources that anyone who wants to spread the message about SV can say the same thing to different people. Give people, for example, signing up merchants. Why not make that an open source business where anyone who wants to go and sign up a chain of coffee shop stores in their town and get them to accept SV, well, here's your toolkit. Here's your branding, here's your this, here's your that, this is your message, that's the slogan. And then, if we all do the same thing, we will get so much further.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm most looking forward to is stability, right?
Yeah.
The more we have, as we've talked about, a lot of stable protocol, the more we can have reinforced repetitive messages that are consistent about that protocol.
I also wanted to add that sometimes issue is not accepting or not accepting Bitcoin. The biggest issue when we go to merchant, they're asking, what problem do you solve?
What problem do you solve?
Yes, if they don't see it
How
as
do you
a
answer
problem, well, we try to tell them that this is money of the future, that more and more people will get to you with this cryptocurrency, and you will have to respond to them, you will have to give them this opportunity to accept. But the biggest issue is still, if merchant will have 10, 20 requests a day, can I pay to you with Bitcoin? Maybe they will see it as an issue, and then they will be willing more to start accepting Bitcoin. So now it's in the hands of community, I will say, of people start using it, and this is the issue that we discussed yesterday, that community have to start using it as a payment, has to start using it for transfer in order for merchants to start willing to accept Bitcoin.
So it starts with often people in this auditorium, this room, to start using it and asking merchants, do you accept it, so that we start the wave. Because if we in this room and those watching out there who are interested in Bitcoin don't start the wave, then it won't start as big as it can and should. So you have an auditorium full of people here who are working in the Bitcoin space. A lot of them are developers or have technical projects. If you could wave your magic wand and ask them to create something that would help in your merchant process, what would you ask them to do? Anyone?
Something for me, I think, is kind of interesting that we've made a lot of false starts. And when I first started looking at how we could accept cryptocurrency in our business, there was actually a solution that integrated with our existing point of sale terminals. So we have these card terminals, and there was I think BitPay had this firmware upgrade that allowed you to present a QR code and accept the payment directly through the existing hardware.
Right.
So I think tools like that are really important. But for whatever reason, I think it was due to the network congestion in Bitcoin at the time, the fees went up, and then it wasn't economically viable for them to continue that product. So I think this kind of message about stability this week's been really important. And if we can, and that commitment really to commerce now, which is really, really important. So those types of tools that interface directly with existing hardware and merchants and make it really easy through existing processes and everything, that's the sort of thing that will really tip things in the direction of adoption for merchants, I think.
Yeah, and Angus Brown from CentBee talked about that yesterday, the importance of creating solutions for existing hardware that merchants have invested so much time and infrastructure in already, which I think is going to be an important bridge period, but that if sometime in the future there will be new ways of paying with Bitcoin that don't use existing infrastructure, but I think we need to create solutions for this period of time that comes in between. What do you think?
I think I would answer this question a little differently. I will
Sure.
take it in another direction. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around regulations
Yes.
and what countries are allowed to hold. It's an international wealth that we're
Right.
trying to move around the world. So is it a commodity? Is it a security? Is it a currency?
Right.
Is it
How
a
is it
utility?
taxed, right?
Exactly. So there's so much uncertainty, and every different country, let alone state, city, like that may have different opinions on how to actually classify this. So if we could get to a level where regulation like is more set and understood, I think merchants would be more accepting of it because they will then know the repercussions or the value of what actually cryptocurrency can do.
Well, a great example is Japan, the first country in the world to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender, therefore, requiring legally merchants and people to accept it for payment as among the payment options. And I know when I talk about regulation, a lot of people out there in the Bitcoin community go, they don't like the idea of talking about laws and regulations, but merchants and businesses find comfort
Right.
in knowing that what they accept for payment is legally recognized and protected.
And banking solutions.
And banking as well, right.
A lot of banks do not want to touch or custody or
Correct.
anything that has touched Bitcoin.
Yeah. So for this to spread, what I'm encouraging our community to do is actually be proactive in talking about and reaching out to regulators and legislators about how Bitcoin should be treated in their country. As opposed to being afraid of it, we need to welcome it into our world because it's the reality and it will help normalize everything we do. Heidi, you have any thoughts?
I think that's an excellent point just on your regulation, and at CentBee we are very pro-regulation because at the end of the day the whole point of regulation is to make something regular, to make it a normal, thing. And I think that we've got to move away from the narrative of like Bitcoin is anarchist, anti-government, a way to cheat the rules, to dodge taxes, etc. That's not what it's for. And any company that hears that narrative is going to stay miles away from it, which we're never going to scale. And even consumers take a lot of comfort from a regulation. Like we in South Africa, we're very, very fortunate to have a very forward-thinking financial regulator, the South African Reserve Bank. And they're luckily very open to working with the industry's experts to try and make this a regular thing and make it acceptable. And I think that that's a good precedent to set because when your Reserve Bank is saying, hey, this thing is okay, consumers will be like, okay, the Reserve Bank said it's okay, so I'm not going to go to jail if I go and buy stuff with Bitcoin. Because I think, in our own little crypto bubble, we're so in this world that we sometimes forget about like the average consumer who's never heard of it, knows nothing about what's going on in crypto. The whole fork is like totally over their heads. We need to talk to that person and make sure that they sort of wake up one day and think, okay, crypto's a good idea, Bitcoin's a good idea, and everyone else is saying that, including my regulator. So therefore, I'm going to go to my grocery store and buy with crypto, with Bitcoin.
Ina, any thoughts on this?
I agree with Heidi and Elizabeth, and the more regulation will come, the more people will adopt Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And we all have to understand that we are in the beginning of this process. It's a really early beginning of development of this technology, and Bitcoin will grow. The question is how fast community will accept it, and I think that with level how all the technologies are progressing right now, it can be really fast. And I also think that next generation, it really depends also how next generation will use it. And I think that the people of next generation, they will like Bitcoin more than regular currency only because that it gives them independence. It gives them independence from government, from banking system. They can feel that they own something on their own, and nobody else controls it. And if we look at that young people right now, they don't really like control. They like to make decisions themselves, and I think that will be also, we will see big progress once this new generation will grow up. Like even kids who right now 13, 12 years old, I think they were asking the most parents last year to buy for birthdays exactly Bitcoin, as a present. So
yeah, buy Bitcoin for your kids for presents,
Yeah.
right? I think we all want to see a world one day where some kid goes, "Mom, the British pound, it's so old. Why are you using that? Euro, please." Right? Please. All right, we have some time now to open up for questions. People have questions of our panel from the audience. Anyone have any questions for our panelists? I'd be interested to hear what people out there think they can do to help companies like this, who are very much on the front line of this merchant process. These are your frontline warriors, people, for Bitcoin's merchant adoption. Yes, a question from Brendan over there.
Hi, it's a bit of a question about enabling efficiency for merchants in their business. And so one thing that you can do very easily with Bitcoin is take a payment and then split that payment between multiple parties. So you can pay VAT at the time of the purchase and really forego the need to reconcile that at the end of every month and make a payment. You can pay for a good that's on consignment at the time of purchase, or any of that kind of stuff. Is that something that you guys have been thinking about, or do you think that's something that merchants would be willing to explore at this time, or is it too early?
Anyone?
I'll take it. I agree with you, and I think that more applications will come as we progress, and this is a great idea, one of the great ideas that exist right now, but we have to go step by step. First, we need to be at merchants' locations, at least, and then, how great companies progress. Sometimes they don't spend even a penny before they develop something new. They first ask their clients, okay, do you want it? Or they even sometimes say, we have it already. And if they see that there is lots of requests for this particular functionality, they will develop it. So that's why I think as soon as we are at the merchant's location, we will listen to them. And then if they will say, oh, that's great functionality, give it to us, we will, of course, make it for them.
Anyone else? Heidi.
So I think that's an amazing suggestion. I'd love to see that in the real world. I think that sometimes we've got to think about blockchain and Bitcoin and this new currency in a different way. I think we need to move away from this is the fiat system and this is how everything works. Now let's copy paste a blockchain way of doing it like that. But what we should be thinking of what is the crazy, amazing thing that we could build that no one in fiat or banking has ever thought about that basically changes everything? And I think that we need to sort of start adopting that instead of, I think for now, the early days, we need to do a copy paste because you're not going to change behavior overnight. But in the future, we should be thinking that. Now, if you took that idea to a tax, to the South African Revenue Service and said, hey, every single time someone pays for something and there's VAT, the Bitcoin system can automatically load that VAT into your bank account immediately without any sort of, they would love that.
Yeah. Reduce government overhead, right? It would reduce government overhead and auditing.
So when you solve the pain for someone, it's all about the killer use case. So if you're solving that pain for tax regulators and you're solving that pain for consumers and you're solving pain for merchants, when you can solve those problems, things will get adopted. It's when it's not that different or not that interesting or just, okay, it's like the Bitcoin version of something we already have. That's nice, but it's not disruptive. What we need is the disruptive use case that does things totally differently in an amazing, and that's what the internet is for, to do all those amazing things. So I think, I love that idea and I'd love to see that happen.
Get working, Brendan.
Make that happen.
Get working on that. I'll take one more question over here.
My name's Nazim. For Heidi, I blanked now.
Can't remember your question.
Leveraging your consumers, because he says to get others to adopt.
Speak a bit louder? I can't hear.
Sorry, to get other people to adopt it, you need to leverage consumers. You were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
How are you doing that at the moment?
So our principle
We're working with BrewDog.
Hey, giving away free money and giving away free beer, that's working pretty well for us. But seriously, the thing that we think is going to drive consumer adoption the most is making things super simple and super easy. So, for example, if you were here yesterday and seen Lorian's presentation, the things that we're bringing out are things like send Bitcoin to your phone contacts. So the pain in Bitcoin has always been like, who can remember a 25-character string Bitcoin address? That is hard work. And even a QR code, well, then the guy needs to be right next to you so you can scan the... Like when you can drop down your phone contacts and say, send money to this person in my contacts, problem solved, consumers adopt that. People love that. And then, of course, ChatPay, which is our next iteration of that, where it's like WhatsApp, but send money to each other in CentBee. That is amazing. So when you make something super simple and super easy, people will start adopting it. And we've seen it. We've had a massive hockey stick growth curve since we launched. We launched our beta product on the 1st of October, and we're on track to have 10,000 registered users by the end of today. So we're really proud of that.